Welcome to our deep dive today into a subject that's both deeply personal and reflects the collective experience of an entire nation, the second generation, those children of Holocaust survivors, and how their lives have been shaped by this monumental historical event. We'll be looking at this through the lens of Israeli cinema, drawing from academic articles, film analysis, historians' perspectives, and even some poignant song lyrics.
It's a powerful area of study, this idea of how history doesn't just live in textbooks, but echoes through families and shapes individual and even national identities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's start with the term second generation.
All right.
We're not talking about those who directly experienced the Holocaust, but those who grew up in its shed as children of survivors.
Okay.
I'm curious, how would you describe the emotional landscape these individuals often navigate?
Imagine growing up not with direct memories of the horrors, but with the weight of unspoken stories.
Yeah.
A sense of anxiety or overprotectiveness from your parents, maybe even a constant barrage of those horrific stories. This unspoken history, this inherited trauma becomes woven into their own life story, whether they consciously recognize it or not.
That's such a powerful image. That weight of unspoken stories. And it makes me wonder, how do personal experiences like these mesh with the official national narrative of the Holocaust in Israel? Is it seen as a private matter, a national tragedy, or a complicated blend of both?
It's a tension that's been present for decades in Israeli society. Early on, there was a strong focus on forging this new Hebrew identity. The Holocaust was, for many, simply too big to digest. It was perceived as something that happened to other people far away.
So if we look at early Israeli cinema films from the 40s and 50s, how did they portray Holocaust survivors within this context of building a new national identity?
These films often employed a Zionist lens, meaning they depicted survivors through a heroic, almost mythical perspective. It was about shedding the vulnerability of the past and embracing the image of the strong, resilient Israeli, deeply connected to the land. Think of it as a visual representation of the nation rebuilding itself.
So these early films kind of glossed over the trauma?
To some extent, yes. The passive, fearful survivor was transformed on screen into an active, often masculine figure, almost erasing the vulnerability and deep psychological scars. It was a way of processing the Holocaust through the lens of national strength and rebirth.
But then history unfolded. You mentioned the Eichmann trial and the Yom Kippur War. These were pivotal events for Israel, weren't they?
Absolutely.
Did they shift how the Holocaust was portrayed in cinema?
Absolutely. After these events, there was a growing recognition that the previous portrayal wasn't the full picture. People began acknowledging the need for a more nuanced, honest depiction of suffering and its lasting impact.
So instead of just erasing the trauma to focus on national strength, they started to acknowledge the individual's pain and the long-lasting effects of that trauma.
Precisely. There was a shift towards acknowledging individual stories, creating space for personal pain alongside the national narrative of resilience and rebirth. It's during this period that we see the emergence of what's termed Israeli postmodern cinema.
Now, I have to admit, postmodern cinema sounds a bit intimidating. Could you break that down for us?
Sure.
What makes it different from those earlier films?
Think of it this way. Postmodern cinema challenges the unified, often idealized national narrative we saw in earlier films. It embraces a more fragmented, diverse perspective on history. It's less about presenting a single truth and more about exploring the complexities of individual and collective identities.
So less heroism and more gritty realism.
You could see that. It's about peeling back the layers and acknowledging the multifaceted nature of the Holocaust and its impact, not just on the nation, but on individuals and families.
And this leads us to the two films our sources focus on, Metallic Blues and the documentary Pizza in Auschwitz. I'm intrigued by the titles alone. They both use journeys, both literal and metaphorical, to explore this complex terrain of being a second-generation survivor,
Yes. They beautifully illustrate how the second generation grapples with their inherited history.
Okay.
Pizza in Auschwitz, for example, follows Danny Hannock, a Holocaust survivor,
right,
as he returns to his childhood home in Poland with his children.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Returning to the very place where such horrors occurred with your children, no less. What happens during that journey?
Whoa.
What makes this film so significant in understanding the second generation experience?
What's so compelling about Pizza in Auschwitz is how it captures this multi-generational dialogue about the Holocaust. Danny is confronting his own memories, wrestling with ghosts, so to speak, while his children have grown up, hearing those stories, perhaps even feeling a bit overwhelmed by what their father calls a lifetime dose of Holocaust history.
Yeah.
It's a powerful dynamic that many families in the second generation could probably relate to.
That makes sense. It's one thing to learn about the Holocaust in school, but to have it be such a central part of your family's narrative, your parents' lived experience, that must create a unique perspective. It's like they're carrying this immense weight alongside their father.
Exactly. And Pizza in Auschwitz does a brilliant job of capturing the different ways the second generation engages with their inherited history. For example, we meet Danny's daughter Miri, who represents a more questioning, perhaps even skeptical viewpoint. You could say she embodies this postmodern approach, challenging the dominant narratives of the past and seeking her own understanding.
And then there's Shai, her brother. I recall from the film analysis you shared that he's referred to as a Sabra. Can you remind us what that means?
Of course. Sabra is a term used to describe a Jew born in Israel. It often carries connotations of resilience, a connection to the land, and a kind of no-nonsense attitude. In the context of the film, Shai represents this newer generation of Israelis, those who didn't experience the Holocaust firsthand, but are grappling with its legacy in their own way.
So within this one family traveling together, you have these three distinct perspectives on the Holocaust. It seems like a microcosm of the broader tensions we've been talking about between individual experience and national narrative, between trying to understand the past and forging your own identity in the present.
That's a great observation. Pizza in Auschwitz, despite its seemingly lighthearted title, delves into some profound questions about memory trauma and how those experiences are carried forward through generations.
Speaking of that title, Pizza in Auschwitz, it seems almost intentionally jarring, doesn't it? To juxtapose something as mundane as pizza with a place that symbolizes such unimaginable horror. And then I recall from our source material that there are actually moments of humor in the film. Is that a way of coping with the heaviness of the subject matter?
The role of humor in Pizza in Auschwitz is fascinating. At first glance, it might seem inappropriate, even disrespectful. But when you look deeper, those moments of humor, however unexpected, actually serve a profound purpose.
So it's not about making light of the tragedy, but finding a different way to connect with it.
Exactly. The sources suggest that humor, even in the darkest of contexts, can be a powerful coping mechanism. It allows for a moment of release, a way to process difficult emotions, to find a bit of light amidst the darkness. In Pizza in Auschwitz, those instances of humor create a bridge between personal and collective experience, between the weight of history and the everyday moments of life.
It's like saying even in the face of unimaginable suffering, the human spirit can still find ways to laugh, to connect, to persevere. I'm wondering, do you think this use of humor, this unconventional approach to dealing with such a sensitive subject, is unique to Pizza in Auschwitz, or do we see it in other films exploring the second-generation experience?
While Pizza in Auschwitz might be a particularly poignant example, the use of humor as a coping mechanism, especially in dark situations, isn't unique to this film or even to this topic. It's a human response that transcends cultural boundaries and historical contexts. But in this case, it adds a layer of complexity and even defiance. It's like reclaiming a sense of agency in the face of overwhelming tragedy.
It makes you think about the different ways we process trauma and find meaning. We often associate the Holocaust with somber reflection, memorials, museums. But perhaps there's also space for humor, not to diminish the suffering, but as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit.
That's a powerful insight. It challenges us to consider the multifaceted nature of memory and how it's expressed.
We've talked a lot about Pizza in Auschwitz, but let's not forget Metallic Blues. I'm curious, how does this fictional film, as opposed to a documentary, portray the second-generation experience? What unique insights does it offer?
Metallic Blues takes a different approach, but it's equally compelling. Instead of a literal journey to the past, it focuses on a metaphorical one. It follows two brothers, also children of Holocaust survivors, who embark on a road trip across present-day Israel. Their journey becomes a means of confronting their family history, understanding their parents' trauma, and ultimately defining their own identities.
So they're not literally going back to concentration camps, but their journey is still about uncovering hidden layers of their family's past.
Precisely. Metallic Blues uses the road trip as a metaphor for self-discovery. The physical journey across the landscape of Israel parallels the emotional journey of these brothers as they grapple with their inherited trauma. It's about trying to fill the void left by their parents' unspoken experiences, about encountering the other, both within themselves and in the people they meet along the way.
I love that idea of the road trip as a metaphor for self-discovery, especially within the context of the second generation. It's like they're searching for something not just about the past, but about themselves, about how to move forward with the weight of that history on their shoulders.
And this connects to a broader theme that emerges from both Pizza in Auschwitz and Metallic Blues, a theme that echoes throughout much of the source material we've explored. The question of responsibility. With survivors aging who will carry the torch of memory, how do we ensure that the stories of the Holocaust continue to be told, not just as historical facts, but as living experiences that shape our understanding of the world?
It's a weighty question, and one that I imagine the second generation grapples with intensely. They're the bridge between those who directly experienced the Holocaust and future generations who will only know it through stories and history books. It feels like a profound responsibility to carry those stories forward, especially as the generation who lived through the Holocaust dwindles. Our sources even brought up the idea that for some in the second generation, there's a sense of urgency, almost like a race against time, to understand and preserve their parents' memories before it's too late.
That sense of urgency is definitely palpable in many of the sources, particularly in the writings and artistic expressions of the second generation. You mentioned the song lyrics earlier, and one that really struck me is 87 in Autumn by the Israeli singer Shlomo Artzi.
I love Shlomo Artzi. What makes this song particularly relevant to our conversation?
Well, the lyrics are quite poetic, but there's this recurring motif of time passing, of memories fading, and a sense of coming to terms with one's own mortality. In one verse, Artzi sings, "I see my funeral procession, the late summer rain, a parade of those who love me, and I am 87 in autumn."
Wow, that's powerful imagery. It sounds like he's reflecting on his life, but also on the passage of time, on the inevitability of loss.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that Artzi's father, Yitzhak Artzi, also an artist, wrote extensively about his own journey back to Romania, his ancestral homeland. He described it as a race against time, feeling the urgency to connect with his roots before those memories and those who held them were gone.
So both father and son grapple with this theme of time and memory, though, in different artistic mediums. It seemed to underscore just how deeply ingrained these questions are for the second generation. It's not just about remembering historical facts. It's about preserving a personal, familial connection to the past.
And there's this poignant line from Yitzhak Artzi's writing that I think beautifully captures this sentiment. A man on the run 2 hours from the battleground. This is a reason for a journey. It speaks to this deep-seated need to understand where we come from, to face the complexities of our history, both personal and collective, even if it means confronting painful truths.
It's like that act of journeying, whether it's a literal trip back to a childhood home or a metaphorical exploration through art or storytelling, becomes a way to honor those who came before, to make sure their stories aren't lost to the passage of time.
Precisely. And for the second generation, that journey often becomes a defining part of their own identity. It's about bridging the gap between the past and the present, finding a way to integrate their parents' experiences into their own life narratives.
You know, as we delve into these deeply personal accounts, these films and songs and writings, it strikes me that remembering the Holocaust isn't just about facts and figures. It's about understanding the human cost, the individual stories of loss and resilience.
I completely agree. The sources emphasize this shift from a purely historical or nationalistic perspective to one that centers on individual experiences. It's about recognizing the multifaceted nature of trauma, how it ripples through generations, and how it shapes individual identities.
And in a way, isn't that a more universal message, one that transcends the specific context of the Holocaust? The idea that history isn't just something we read about in textbooks, but something that lives within families, that shapes who we are, and that we have a responsibility to carry forward in a meaningful way.
That's a profound insight, and I think it speaks to the enduring power of this topic. The Holocaust, while undeniably a horrific chapter in human history, also offers valuable lessons about human nature, about resilience, about the importance of memory, and ultimately about the need to confront injustice and prejudice wherever we see it.
This has been incredibly moving and thought-provoking exploration, and I have to say, I feel a sense of hope amidst the heaviness, hope, because these stories, these films, these songs, they demonstrate the power of the human spirit to find meaning and even beauty in the face of unimaginable darkness.
I share that sense of hope. It's a testament to the enduring power of storytelling, to the ways in which art can help us process trauma, build empathy, and ultimately connect with one another on a deeper level.
And I think that's a beautiful note to end on. As we wrap up this deep dive, dear listener, we encourage you to continue exploring these stories, these films, these reflections on history and memory. What resonates with you? How do you connect to this complex legacy? And perhaps most importantly, how will you carry the torch of memory forward, ensuring that these stories continue to be told, that these lessons are never forgotten?
Those are powerful questions and ones that each of us must grapple with in our own way. The Holocaust demands that we engage with it thoughtfully, that we learn from it, and that we commit ourselves to building a world where such atrocities are never repeated.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep striving for a world worthy of the memory of those who were lost.